I don't know about you, but I personally am sick of seeing these grey, lifeless films set in the medieval period, because it did not look like this, and I need to talk about it. It's become quite the trend for these films set during the Middle Ages to look just like brown, and I can understand why, because, you know, it's a stylistic choice. They want to make it look as gritty and as period drama-y as possible, which is understandable. But if, like, I don't really understand how you look at the source material and think, yes, let me drain all the life out of this. Like, colour was such an important part of the medieval day-to-day that it often like pulls me out of wanting to watch the film, because, you know, the fashion historian in me is like, it's not accurate. Oh. And I know it's a bit silly, because again, it's just a stylistic choice, but I thought I would take this time to talk about like how medieval fashion sort of looked like and how they achieved these vibrant colours, sort of talk about a bit of a social hierarchy surrounding these colours, because it's not just what you wore, but also how you appeared in society. It's quite interesting, so I thought I would just have a little talk to you about that sort of thing. So to start, well, how do we know this? Well, medieval fashion is quite well documented. There's plenty of manuscripts and tapestries and artwork from this time showing how everyday people dressed. Now sure, those of the peasantry would have had their clothes dyed a much more natural colour, more earth-toned, or even had undyed clothes if they could not afford it. But there were still some that would have been very easy to come by for them to dye their own clothes. And if you had money, you would have worn as brightly coloured clothing as possible to show your social status, because dye was often very expensive, and the more saturated your outfits were, the more money you had. It's like, why would they draw these people with such brightly coloured clothes if that wasn't what they were wearing at the time, you know, that sort of thing. But also like the flags carried by, like, you know, the monarchy were brightly coloured, and, you know, knight like sort of tunics, forgive me, I'm not quite sure what they're called, but they would have been more brightly coloured, and like the battlefield would have been more colourful than what is shown in modern media. And it's like, why would they have all of these brightly coloured things if they all just were brown all the time? It just feels very out of place. This is a very handy guide by the Epic Armory, linked in the description, that shows what materials and colours would have been available to everybody during this period, and it's quite interesting to really show just how versatile clothing options could be. Colours also weren't just a social symbol, they also had specific meanings like we sort of have today. For example, blue for the Virgin Mary and green for like vitality and nature, that sort of thing. So wearing a specific colour would have shown you're religious, or that sort of what you worked as, you know, similar things to that. So how did they dye their clothes? Well, back before dyes came in a bottle, they used, you know, plants, insects and other natural things to achieve this colour. Not to say that no one uses natural dyes anymore, but ever since the Victorian era, you know, Shield green, Morphine, that sort of thing, people have chosen the more chemical route. But yeah, there was quite a few ways to achieve the different colours. This guide shows what sort of plants were available at the time and how those would have translated into colours. But yeah, to start, you would heat a cauldron or another, you know, metal vessel full of water. Then you would add to your fibre or material that you were dyeing a mordant. This is a type of mineral compound, usually alum, iron or copper, things relatively easy to achieve, and these metal components would have binded to the fabric to make it actually okay for them to dye, because a lot of these fibers would not hold the dye well if they did not have this compound, well, holding it together. Then you would add the material you were actually using to dye, whether that be a plant or whatever, into the mix and let that sit. You want it just hot enough for the dye to leak out of the plant or whatever, but not hot enough to be boiling, because that will affect the colour that you get out of this and the saturation that you get out of it. Then you would obviously add in the material that you were dyeing and just let that sit for a few hours to a few days, depending on, you know, the quality of what you were dyeing and, you know, how long it needed to be sit, like the vibrancy you were trying to achieve, that sort of thing. There's a brilliant video of someone doing this on the Hull Museum YouTube channel. I'll link it down below, which goes so you can get a visual idea of what this dyeing process would have looked like. But yeah, I don't think there's much else to say on this particular bit. And that's the end of the video. I know this is super short and it's not my normal length of video. Life has been really hectic for me and I've been very unwell, so but I still wanted to get my second video of this month out because I really cherish you guys, so I hope you can forgive me on that front. Yeah, I actually have some really fun things planned for the next few months, which I think you will appreciate it. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of this year, so if you like this sort of content, I think you should stick around. You know, it's a win-win for both of us. I have other historical videos on my channel if you want to check them out. And yeah, I hope you stick around for the next one. Yeah, I hope you have a fabulous day or night. Bye bye.